To do some summarizing here. I always take some notes, as you see, while you're talking. We talked about progress, but I think what we all agree with is there's tremendous progress going on in mobility. The remote access remains some challenges out there in that progress. We've seen increases in BYOD and how that's being implemented. We see a lot of increases in governance for progress being made for collaboration. Many of you talked about how mobility is requiring a lot more collaboration across government around that digital government strategy, and things are getting better and they're getting faster, and there's pressure on to do that. We heard about the digital government strategy as a specific. Telecommuting becomes a big deal and will continue, and the Army Recruiting Command is a specific program that I think was cited by many of you here as being something that's a real specific program that's making tremendous progress. We talked about lessons. One that hit home with me quickly is stick with that customer perspective. Don't forget that you're really building these things for your customers, not for your techies that want to do gee whiz things. And you need to include all the stakeholders. That came out pretty close too. It's not about just a group, but all the stakeholders. We talked about life cycles in upgrades going to be challenges, and perhaps lessons could be more managed services kinds of things as opposed to actually purchasing of devices in order to have a model that can keep that life cycle, shorten that life cycle, especially with the length of time it takes the government procurement processes to work through. And lessons governance came up again when we were talking about lessons, the importance of governance. When we talked about priorities, what jumped out right away was identity management. What jumped out, that identity management and the authentication of who's using the device becomes a real enabler to a lot of these initiatives we're talking about. And making the apps the center of the user experience came out. It's as a goal. And of course, the integration of products. There's so many different products out there. There's so many different debates over which products to use, when to use them, and so forth. Challenges, complexity came out there. This is more complicated than you think when you try to put this stuff together. We had the challenge of security versus functionality. We had the challenge of cost and budget. And of course, the big one that always comes out in these discussions, culture. We're talking about doing things different. When you talk about change, you talk about resistance to change, you talk about new cultures. And finally, looking towards the future, we talked about different models, talked about different ways to do perhaps managed services. I believe if we can solve the identity management issue with remote access and bandwidth continues to increase, that we haven't even touched our imagination yet of what's going to be able to be enabled in the future. I think there's some really wild stuff coming down the road once some of these initial issues are solved. With that, I want to thank our panelists first for taking time from your very busy schedules to come here today and share your expertise with us.